Well, here's something you might not realize. Seniors today are unknowingly reviving Depression-era hiding methods in everyday life. A lot of seniors these days figure they've left the habits of the Great Depression way behind. But if you take a closer look, there's actually something pretty fascinating going on. All across homes, workshops, garages, and even out in the garden, practices that were born out of necessity back in the 1930s are quietly making a comeback. And it's not because of nostalgia or because someone sat down and studied that old era. No, it's because the same pressures that shaped those behaviors are starting to show up again in new forms. Rising costs, distrust of big centralized systems, fear of loss, and just this renewed instinct to take control of your own survival. All of that is pushing folks to rediscover old methods, maybe without even realizing where they came from. What we're seeing here isn't imitation, it's more like convergence. Instead of just tossing valuables into containers, folks started using the very structure of the home for concealment. Back during the Great Depression, families learned real quick that boxes, safes, and drawers just invited someone to go snooping. Anything obvious was vulnerable. So instead, folks hid their valuables right inside the house itself. Floorboards would get lifted up and put back down. Loose bricks in the fireplace turned into little vaults. Even hollow bedposts and curtain rods got put to work hiding things. And today, a lot of seniors are doing pretty much the same thing, maybe without even thinking about it. When they tape envelopes behind electrical panels, slide documents under heavy appliances, or stash a little cash inside an unused vent cover. These aren't just random spots either. They're instinctive returns to a strategy that worked back when banks were failing and theft was a real worry. A practical way to look at it now is to stop thinking about storage and start thinking about placement. Instead of hiding all your valuables in one place, spread them out within the home's architecture. A sealed envelope behind a breaker panel, a waterproof pouch taped under a sink cabinet, or a document sleeve tucked inside a rarely used attic junction box. It all follows the same logic Depression-era families used. And really, it's not just about secrecy. It's about making sure discovery is unlikely, even if someone's searching pretty thoroughly. So, separating assets physically instead of keeping them centralized was a key strategy. One of the most consistent survival rules during the Depression was never keeping everything in one place. Families would divide cash, jewelry, ration cards, and important papers across multiple locations. This, ensured that a fire, theft, or forced eviction wouldn't wipe out everything at once. Seniors today, repeat this behavior when they keep some cash at home, some in a safe deposit box, some hidden in a vehicle, and some tucked away in outbuildings. Few folks recognize this as a Depression-era risk mitigation strategy, yet it is exactly that. Applying this deliberately means, assigning purpose to each location. One cache is for immediate emergencies, another is for long-term recovery, another is for mobility if relocation becomes necessary. This method is especially relevant for documents such as property deeds, military records, medical histories, and identification. Keeping copies in different physical locations, rather than relying solely on digital backups, really does mirror how families survived sudden displacement during the 1930s. Using ordinary household objects to disguise importance was pretty common. Depression-era families understood that the safest hiding places were those that appeared worthless. Tin cans filled with nails were actually filled with coins. Flour sacks concealed jewelry. Worn books held folded cash. Today's seniors unknowingly replicate this when they place valuables inside cleaning supply containers, toolboxes, or even outdated electronics. The logic here is unchanged. Thieves, they look for value. Survivors, on the other hand, hide in plain sight. This principle can still be applied today by choosing concealment that matches your environment. For example, in a workshop, a sealed container labeled as spare bolts can actually hold important items. In a kitchen, a box marked as expired dry goods can protect documents as long as they're inside moisture-resistant sleeves. The real effectiveness lies in credibility. The object must belong naturally in the space and, attract no attention. Relying on memory-based systems instead of written inventories was key. Back during the Depression, written lists were downright dangerous. If someone found them, they revealed everything. So, families relied on mental maps, passed quietly between spouses or trusted relatives. Seniors today often do the same thing, sometimes without even realizing it. They remember where things are rather than writing them down. They know which book, which drawer, which corner of the shed. This isn't forgetfulness. It's actually an inherited survival instinct. To use this effectively today, keep concealment knowledge limited. Only one trusted person should know each location, not everyone. Rotate access if memory becomes unreliable, but, avoid central documentation. If records are necessary, encode them in a way that only makes sense to those who already understand the system. This really mirrors how Depression-era households preserved secrecy, even under pressure. Using outdoor spaces for long-term storage instead of just sticking things inside your home was a pretty common practice. Back in the 1930s, when homes were searched or even seized, the safest spots were often outside. Folks would use gardens, fence posts, tree roots, and even buried containers to keep their valuables protected in ways that just weren't possible indoors. And seniors today, they might not even realize they're tapping into this old strategy when they stash valuables in sheds under decking inside planters or bury them in sealed containers along the property line. What might look like just a bit of clutter actually shows some real deep-rooted survival thinking. These days, though, you gotta make sure what you use is durable and discreet. Waterproof containers, materials that resist corrosion, and making sure you're not picking obvious spots to dig. Those are all key. Marking your hiding spots with subtle landscape features instead of leaving any obvious signs. That's the same principle folks used nearly a century ago. And, hey, this isn't about being paranoid, it's about being resilient. Now, it's important to remember that concealment should be seen as temporary and adaptable, not something permanent. One hard lesson folks learned during the Depression was that no hiding place stays safe forever. As situations changed, so did where they hid things. Seniors today, they show this kind of thinking without even realizing it. Rotating hiding places, moving items with the seasons, or making changes when the household shifts. This kind of flexibility, it's not about being indecisive. It's a tried-and-true survival strategy. Applying this intentionally means, reviewing concealment plans periodically. If a renovation occurs, reassess locations. If new people enter the home, adjust accordingly. If physical ability changes, ensure access remains practical. Depression-era families survived because they adapted continuously rather than relying on fixed solutions. Understanding that concealment is about control, not fear. Perhaps the most important lesson carried forward is that hiding valuables was never about fear alone. It was about maintaining agency when systems failed. Seniors today often feel most secure not because they distrust institutions entirely, but because they know they have personal control if those institutions falter. That mindset is identical to what sustained families through the hardest years of the 20th century. Using these methods consciously transforms them from habits into tools. It allows history to inform preparedness without nostalgia or panic. It turns quiet behaviors into deliberate survival planning rooted in real-world experience. Why these old methods still matter in a modern world? The relevance of Depression-era hiding strategies lies in their simplicity and independence. They require no technology, no subscriptions, no permissions. They rely on observation, discretion, and discipline. Seniors who practice them today are not clinging to the past. They are demonstrating that some solutions outlast the eras that created them. For historians and survivalists alike, recognizing these patterns provides insight into how societies respond when trust erodes and self-reliance becomes essential again. These methods endure because they work. If you value serious historical analysis grounded in practical reality, subscribe to Battlefield of Survival, share this guide with others who appreciate real knowledge over noise, and keep these lessons alive by using them wisely.